And welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to talk about transitioning view controllers and how they work. We're going to talk about presenting modally, how we can hijack basically presentation delegates in view controllers to basically specify where we want them to come from. Apple has a default implementation that looks kind of something like this. You might have seen it if you do present view controller or dismiss, it comes up from the bottom and goes down. Not super helpful because what if we want it to come from the right or the left or the top and not the bottom? What we can do here is we're going to create a customizable, reusable object, which will be a view controller that we can pass around and delegate other views to do whatever we want. So let's get started. Make a single view application. I'll call this transition animations. Hit save. All right. We'll go in. Let's look at our view, or our storyboard. Pardon me. Let me make this bigger for you guys. Okay, pretty good. So we've got just a single view controller. Let's put a button on it first. Okay, and I'll basically set this button's vertical and horizontal position to the center, like that. And let's just drag out another view controller just so you guys can see kind of what's going to be happening here. And I'll make this background color another color. Let's make it pink for now. And the old traditional method of doing this is dragging over the outlet from the button to the view controller and setting our action segue as show. You guys probably remember this. And if this tutorial is a little bit advanced, because it kind of will be, you might want to look for a more basic tutorial on YouTube of how to create outlets and create and use segues. But for this purpose, if you click on this, we'll just call this a show action, right? This will be our segue identifier that we can pass around. And if I run this, this is going to do the basic implementation, the one I showed you in that GIF in the beginning. And for all intents and purposes, this is great, but a lot of times we don't want to do this in our applications. We actually want to have a little bit more customizable control over it. So let's start actually doing that. The first thing I'll do is I'll create a new view controller class, right? I'll just call this new view controller. And I'll show you really quickly. This is the simulator I just ran, but if I hit the button, it just comes up from the bottom. That's that default. I don't want it to do that. I want it to come from the right or the left or the top or something else, something more interesting. Okay, so call this new view controller. This will just be a default implementation class that is subclass from UIView controller. I'm going to remove all this stuff. Everything else here is perfectly fine. And I don't need to do anything here, but I do need to go into my storyboard and link this view controller's parent, or I guess you can think of it as class, to the new view controller, like so. Boom. And let's create a new CocoaTouch class, and we'll call this our custom presentation controller, and we'll adhere from NS objects. Okay. Nice. Okay, so how do we want to do this? Well, we want to specify where we're coming. So for me, the easiest way to do that is let's just create an enumeration really quickly, and we'll call this presenting direction. Okay, and we'll have, oops, not a class, sorry. We'll have different cases in here like top, right, left, bottom. Okay. And we might come back to this and do something else, but that gives me the ability to have a variable on here, which is basically going to be presenting direction, right? And I can basically just say it's of type presenting direction. Okay, cool. That's going to complain right now because we're not initializing it in a init, right? So let's not override init, but let's pass in a direction into our initializer here, which will be of type presenting direction. Right? And then I can just say, okay, well, whatever you pass in, self, is going to be presenting direction equal to the direction that you passed in. Okay, awesome. I'll take care of that error. Okay, so what we want to do is when we're working with creating custom animations in views, we can hijack, like I said, something called the UIView controller animating transition. And we need to basically adhere to this UIView controller animated transitioning. Okay, so adopt this. It says adopt the UIView controller animated transitioning protocol to objects that implement animations in custom view controller transitions. It's exactly what we want. So let's drop that guy in there, and it's going to complain, right? Because we haven't implemented our delegate methods. So let's do that here. Methods, like so. Okay. And so what are they? Well, the first one is going to be our transition duration that we want to take care of. And for this example, we'll just return 1.0, right? For a quick and easy, nice transition. You might want something a little bit longer in your application. And the next one we're going to do is animate transitioning with the transition context. Okay, this is really the meat and the potatoes of this transition and of any transitions we're going to be doing. Basically, the way it works is the animate transition delegate will get called when we go or fire off, for example, remember that button I had back over here, I pressed that. That calls present view controller, right, with that segue. Well, what it's going to do is it's going to override that and it's going to call back to this method. So this animate, and you can see there's also going to be, if I was to do a dismiss, there would be a dismiss, I believe, animate context. There's a dismiss in here that you can use as well. So like if you were going to be dismissing, you would use that one, and that would override the dismissing one as well. And maybe we'll go through that in another video. It's basically the same implementation in same context. But the first thing we want to do is first we need to get a hold of where we are, the view controller that we're using, so that we can animate a new one in. So I'll call this from view controller, which will equal our view controller. I'm sorry, transition context. Excuse me. And we want to use our view controller, this one, which is returns a view controller involved in the transition. Okay. And well, what does this want? It wants a UI transition view controller key. Okay. Well, there's one where we can specify our to and from. Well, we just want our from. That will give us the one that's involved in where we're coming from. And so let's do our to view controller. We need to define this one as well. Equal to transition context dot view controllers for key. We'll say that, and we'll say to. Very nice. Okay. Looking pretty good. So we got our to and we got our from. So we know we're going to pass our to and know our pass our from. So let's do, now we need to specify the final frame of the new view controller. So we'll say let final frame, say final VC frame, because this is going to be a frame, equal to our transition context, okay, dot final frame for view controller, right? And what's that view controller? Well, that's our to view controller, right? That's going to be the final frame. So basically it knows what's the size of the frame that we're working with that we're going to pass. And why is it complaining here? What does it want? It just wants to make sure, because I guess it can return nil. Okay, that's fine. We can always unwrap that later. But we know that we're going to be passing over another view controller, so that it won't fail in this instance. Okay, and then the last thing is the container view we want to set. And contain TNIER view like that. Okay, and what is this? This is basically our transition context.container view. This is the container view or the UI view that we are working with during our transition in animation. So this would technically be, for the first part of the container view, it would be the from view controller, and then as we're transitioning into the next view controller, it'd be that from. So the next thing we want to do is basically perform an animation. And I'm going to skip one part for a second here in this. We would basically specify out what's our next frame of our final view controller, but we're going to come back to, actually, let's just do it right now. So we're going to say here we will add our, actually, let's do this. Let's hop over into, we need a method. See, the thing is, we're going to need a method to specify, okay, what are the bounds? So we need to do this. We can specify computed property in a enumeration, right? Which will be, let's call this a bounds, right? Because we want to use the bounds that we're using. I'm trying to think how to do this. We'll just use CG. Okay, so we'll say CG rect, and we'll just return UI screen main.bounds. Okay, that will give us the bounds of what we want. And then we're going to have a function in this enumeration. And you may not be used to this, but having a function inside of inside of an enumeration is very, very useful and very helpful. So we'll say offset, we'll call this offset with frame. Okay, like that. And we need to pass it a view frame. Okay, and this will be a CG rect, and we want to return a CG rect. And I'll show you why we're going to do this in a second. Why is this complaining? CG font, oh, CG flip rect. Like that. Okay, so watch what we do here. This is going to be pretty interesting. So we're going to switch on whatever we've assigned ourselves here for this enumeration. So when I say presentation direction, and we have this variable down here that's presentation direction, I'm going to assign it, right? One of these cases in the initializer, boom, like this. So whatever this gets assigned, we're going to switch on that. So let's do this. We'll say top, and okay, and we'll, for the top, we're going to just return the view frame offset by, we want 0 for the top, and we'll want negative bounds for the bottom, size dot height, I believe. Oops. Height, like that. Okay, nice. We can get rid of this default one, and I'm just gonna actually copy and paste this. So we're gonna use it like 4 times for each of the cases. And then I'm gonna say top, bottom. Okay, and bottom is basically going to be offset by just this. And this will be the left. And to go to the left, we're gonna do, instead of size dot height, we're gonna use size dot width here. And we're actually going to specify the y coordinates as 0 and the x value as that. And then we'll specify the top right as the offset of the bounds, like this, plus itself, plus 0, like that. Okay, nice. Okay, that looks pretty good, right? So now what's great about this offset with frame, I can actually just come down here and use it. I can use it in this animate transitioning function, which will be really nice. So what I need to do is, for one, I need to say the two view controllers frame. Actually, I have to call view.frame, I believe, right? Dot frame, yep, is equal to, okay, well, what is the two view controllers frame? Well, we want it to be eventually equal to the frame that we're in, right? So that would be the presentation direction, right? And offset, see how now I have, since it is of type of presentation direction, which is this enumeration, I can now specify or call this function, right, of itself. So whatever it gets set to, I can call and return one of these values, which is very, very handy. So I can come in here and say offset with view. Okay, right? And then I need to offset this to view controllers.frame, because I'm setting the frame, which is a CG rect, right, to something. And well, what is that something? Well, that's the final VC frame, right? And that's already a CG rect, like so. Very, very convenient. And it wants a question mark there. That's fine. Okay, and then I can set the container views, and I can say add subview, right? Because the container view is that view that we're in as view controllers come in and out. Okay, and then I can drop in this to view controller dot view, right? Because it's technically a view of the view controller that we're going to drop in. Now, to make it kind of cool, I'm going to call a UIView animation here, and we're going to just basically, it's going to be a very simple animation, but we're going to dim in and out the view, so it kind of fades in and out, which is kind of nice. So it'll fade in, fade out. And then we'll also use a spring dampening. So we want to use animate with duration, interval, void. Nope. Sometimes if you can't find these things, animates initial spring dampening. I think it's this one. Yeah, awesome. All right, so our time interval is what? Well, our time interval is just our transition duration time interval, right? So I can actually just say transition duration like that, right? And it's going to ask for a context. Well, that context is just this one, right? Like that. Pretty simple. I can have a delay on this, which I won't have a delay. You can if you want. I'll have an initial spring velocity, or using spring velocity of 0.5. We'll have an initial spring velocity of 0 because we don't want it to already have a spring velocity. Okay. Our options, you can specify options here if you want. I'll just use, we'll use curvilinear for this one, so it's kind of smoother. That way it's a little bit smoother. And our animations, okay, right? Our animations, this is kind of where our action is going to be happening, right? All right, well, what do we want to do here? The first thing we want to do is basically take the from view controller, and we want to take the views alpha, right? Alpha like that, and we were going to set it to 0.5, so it starts to dim out, right? We want it to kind of get dim. And then we're going to take the two view controllers, that frame, dot view, not frame, and we're going to start setting it equal to what? Well, the final frame of the view controller. Okay, that way it kind of morphs into it. And then in this, which is our completion handler, we'll simply, let's see, what are these errors? Why are we getting these errors? Okay, that's fine. That's because it's not unwrapped. You know what? We can avoid a lot of this just by doing this and this. So let me just do that real quick. Sorry, guys. It's going to say to delete this stuff now. Just delete that. And that. We'll delete that. Okay, that should be better. Okay. So, and then our callback, which will be, this is just essentially the callback on the animation. So once it is completed, and we'll say our transition context dot completed transition, okay? And we'll say true because we know it's completed. So that's the finalization of it. And then we'll just basically set the alpha of the from view controller view to 0. So from view controller dot alpha view dot alpha equal to 1, like that. All right. Pretty simple, right? This animation is not too crazy, but if you were to break it down into just two parts, you're dimming the view and then you're setting the view back lit after the animation is completed. You're bouncing the view in with these initial spring velocities, right? And you're putting the context of the duration of the entire animation to the context of this. Not too terrible. Probably the most confusing part for a lot of people will be this right here, where we're saying presenting direction of offset frame, which basically it's really simple. It's whatever we set this presentation. So when we initialize it, let's just, I'll do it right now. I'll just show you guys. Okay, so a couple things in our view controller with our button, right? There's a couple different things we actually really quickly want to do. And the first thing that we're going to actually end up doing is we're going to adhere to a delegate that we need to, that will call back once we call that animate, which will be UIView controller transitioning delegate like that. Okay, and that's going to give us access to a bunch of different methods, but one of them being that we actually want to use, which is going to be for presented. So it's function animate controller for the presented view controller that we're going to use. And so basically we're just passing in, instead of the standardized version of, you might remember the present self.present view controller animated true or whatever you want, you know, we're going to return here an instance that we're going to have up here. So we'll have a static let Actually, we'll just make this a let view. We'll call this our custom presentation controller, like that, equal to our custom, what did I call it? Presentation controller, like that. And when we initialize this, remember we have this cool convenience initializer, and I'll say, let's make it come from the left, which will be kind of cool, right? So we'll slide in over from the left like this, instead of coming from the bottom. Okay, well, here I can simply just return that custom. Autocomplete is kind of going crazy today. Custom controller like that. And the last thing we need to do is we need to override our prepare for Segue, right? So if you're using a Segue, I hate segues personally, but if we are using a Segue for this instance, and I'll go into another video, I'll go into detail on that in another video if you guys want, but essentially we need to override the prepare for Segue. Func prepare for Segue, where is it? If I could spell. Okay. And in here, we're just going to check if our segues identifier is equal to, and I think I set it equal to something in the beginning. We'll look at what that is. And if so, basically, we need to say let our 2 VC equal segue dot destination as a UIView controller. This is one of the reasons I don't like them. But our 2VC dot transition delegate, we need to make ourselves. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to call back like that. And well, what is this identifier that we want to use, you ask? Let's see. That would be show action. Simple. Simple, simple, simple. Put it here. We'll run. And let's see what we get. I think this video is getting a little bit long. So if I press this button, instead of coming from the bottom, it should come from the left, right? Ooh, nice, look at that. And I don't have a dismiss button here, but if I did, I could show you how you could do a dismiss action. But let's, for the sake of this, instead, let's make it come from the top, okay? Just switching the direction around here a little bit, that's all. And I'm noticing something interesting, actually. Let this guy run. I'll show you what that is in a second. All right, so instead of coming from the right or the bottom, we'll come from, what did I say, the top? Boom, look at that, and it bounces in, really cool. Cool animation, cool effect, right? So yeah, so that's gonna wrap it up for today's video. If you guys have any more questions, you guys want a copy of this code, let me know. One thing I would do, probably I'll show you really quickly, is probably drop this in an extension so it's a little bit cleaner. Something I like to do is use extensions. Some people don't like to. I think it just makes better and cleaner code. So I would drop this out, okay? I would make this file private too, so file private. And I would use an extension on our custom presentation controller, right? And I would drop these functions down in here. And the reason I would do that is because look how clean it honestly makes our class. If this is our class, all we have is we know that we have our variable and we have our initializer. And the reason I like to see it like this is because it's like all this other garbage that I don't really need to look at, like these, you know, animation methods, or like let's say you had a class that had all these methods that performed something, you know, something on some object. As long as you have the variables here, it's kind of like consolidating it down, and it makes it so much easier to read. Look at this, you know, as opposed to having it all jammed up here. Just my 2 cents and my advice. But extensions kind of are your friend, in short. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, please let me know. If not, have a great week.